Good news if you need your Star Wars fix, Disney has released the first trailer for the upcoming Star Wars Resistance. The trailer introduces us to Kaz Xiono, a young wannabe pilot that gets recruited by the Resistance to work undercover on a refueling platform. Xiono's mission seems to be spying on the First Order while maintaining his cover as a mechanic/racing pilot, which, all things considered, is a pretty cool premise. The rest of the cast includes Jaeger, an old friend of Poe Dameron's that begrudgingly allows Kaz to join his crew even though he doesn't want trouble from the First Order, and also on Jaeger's crew are Tam and Niku, who I presume are these two, and of course there's an old astromech. Oddly enough, the secondary character with the most screen time in the trailer isn't named in the press release or the trailer itself, but it seems that her name is Tora Doza, and she will serve as Kaz's friendly rival / possible love interest, depending on how much angst they can generate with Kaz's double life. It looks like we'll find out relatively soon though. Star Wars Resistance premieres on the Disney Channel on Sunday, October 7th, before moving to its regular home on Disney XD. Meanwhile, if you're looking for something to watch right now, Marvel HQ has released all 6 episodes of Marvel Rising Initiation, a series of shorts detailing your usual Marvel misunderstanding as Spider-Gwen tries to clear her name of a murder she didn't commit. The web series, no pun intended, is meant to establish a new animated universe which will continue with a full-length movie later this year. And finally, in Blizzard/Nintendo news, Diablo is heading for the Switch with Diablo 3 Eternal Collection. Due out this fall, you'll be able to grind demons to your heart's content with all of the current Diablo 3 content released thus far, and of course, since it's a fantasy game on the Switch, there's the obligatory Zelda crossover. In this case, a Ganondorf transmogrification set complete with a Cuckoo companion. This makes Blizzard's first game on the Switch, but it may not be the last. While WoW or StarCraft probably aren't in the cards, Blizzard hasn't completely ruled out on an Overwatch port. Heading into new releases, it looks like it's finally time to get rid of the Infinity Wars transition. Hitting theaters this week, we have
The Happy Time Murders.
Directed by Brian Henson, yes, son of Jim Henson, comes, wow, okay, it's Roger Rabbit, but with Muppets, Melissa McCarthy, and massively mature content. If you're looking for something a little more wholesome, though, there's
AXL.
Everybody loves a movie about a boy and his dog, but this time the dog is a hyper-advanced robot. It's short circuit, but if Johnny Five was a robot dog, and I'm totally fine with that. Next up,
Searching.
For something more serious, and might especially hit close to home if you're in the Midwest, Searching has John Cho in a dramatic role as a father desperate to find his missing daughter and discovering he didn't know her as well as he thought. And there's more crime drama on TV as Mr. Mercedes returns for a second season on Audience Network this week. I don't know much about the show, but it seems like after stopping a mass murderer by putting him into a coma, some genius decided to give him psychic powers, so that'll be a mess. Meanwhile, over on Netflix, Ghoul is a creepy-as-hell Arabic series about a Middle Eastern interrogator starting a new job at a detention center that houses more than just your typical terrorists. In books this week, if you can't wait for the upcoming PlayStation Spider-Man game, there is a handy prequel novel on the way to introduce you to this particular iteration of the Marvel Universe. And heading into PC releases, Lily's Night Off is just one of the usual dozen or so visual novels coming out this week, but come on, look at that paper coloring book style. That is pretty cute. For the aspiring artist, Pixel Draw is basically just a virtual coloring book, but if you're interested in pixel art, it could be a good place to practice. And speaking of pixel art, Need a Packet is an adventure game about a supermarket cashier that appears to be gradually going insane. Looks pretty trippy. For a more familiar kind of game, we have yet another anime-styled fighter with a ridiculous name. Undernight Inbirth EXE Latest is part fighting game and part visual novel from Arc System Works, and considering the publisher, is probably pretty good at both. But if you really want a story-rich game, take a trip back to 1999 for a trip back to 1986 with Shenmue 1 and 2, as Sega reintroduces the groundbreaking open-world game to a new generation with an updated release. And another long-awaited sequel, Guacamelee 2, is also getting a wide release this week for round 2 of punching and platforming. Getting back to the creepy side of gaming, Luca, Born of a Dream, is a game of some sort. It seems like a brawler with RPG elements, but mostly it'll be the art style that captures your attention. And even more creepy, Typical Nightmare is a first-person horror game that looks like it was designed to root out any phobia a player might possibly have, so have fun with that. Then there's Undead and Beyond, a game that puts you in the lab coat of a mad scientist trying to escape his enemies by building an army of undead monster. Kind of like playing Resident Evil, but in reverse. On the more colorful side of things, Socketeer is a roguelite game about a robot that can strategically plug into enemies to get through puzzles and other robot hordes, and another game about robots with roguelike elements is Lazy Galaxy Rebel Story, a top-down shooter with a cute art style and plenty of weapons to discover. And yet another roguelite, this time in first person, Hypergun is a shooter where you're tasked with building weapons of questionable effectiveness out of procedurally generated parts. And hey, of course we can't go a week without another Metroidvania game. This time it's Castlevania. Oh, I see what you did there. Meanwhile, The King's Bird is this week's amazing looking precision platformer, and yep, that checks out. Man, that is a pretty looking game. This week's RPG Maker entry is Pit of Evil by Frogmouth. Not much to say about it really, other than it looks like a pretty competently made game for a first timer. And here's a weird one. Space Lords launches this week on PC, PS4, and Xbox One, so why am I showing Raiders of the Broken Planet? Well, it's because they're the same game. Raiders of the Broken Planet released last year, selling 4 chapters at $10 a pop, a business model that apparently didn't work out so well, so Mercury Steam is relaunching the game as Space Lords, a free-to-play game utilizing a microtransaction model instead. Also heading to the PS4 this week is Pizza Titan Ultra, a game that came out on PC last April about a pizza delivery service that utilizes a giant robot that has to fight the armies of competing pizza places while avoiding collateral damage. It looks neat. Coming out on the Switch this week is Fern's Gate, a JRPG originally developed for mobile platforms that's moving on up to consoles. And finally, let's take a moment to look back at gaming history as Nintendo of America's Howard Lincoln throws the rest of the gaming industry under the bus during the 1993 moral panic during his congressional testimony.
And let me say that for the record, I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system.
Night Trap is scheduled for a release this week on the Nintendo Switch. That leaves us with this week's awesome video. It's 60 seconds of pixel art combat as Cloud takes on Link in Hyun's Dojo's 1-minute melee.
The Divine Links are blazing! Fuck that!
That's everything for this week, so what's your take on Star Wars Resistance? Are you feeling it, or are you just gonna wait for new episodes of Clone Wars? Let me know in the comments. As always, I appreciate likes, and I appreciate subscribers even more, so pass this video around to your friends, and have a great week!